Hey everybody, welcome to the All UVCast channel. And today, this weekend, we don't have a match until Monday, so we're gonna do things a little bit differently. And I may be getting older, whatnot, but I pay attention to what happens in these chat rooms. And if you got a hot take, and you got a little bit of rebuttal there, and guys are going back and forth, we're gonna start taking it to the show. And this is the first of these hot takes debates. And we've got AJ going up against Lewis today. And the category, the topic is what if Max Allegri had stayed? All right. So, this one generated a very, very strong response from Lewis. And AJ seems to. AJ was a big fan of Allegri. There's no doubt there. And today I get to play referee, I guess, and just hang back. And I love that. And I'm going to just say to everybody, go into this with an open mind and just hear the arguments for both and make your decision then. Don't come in already jumping on one side or the other, okay? But we've got 5 categories that these guys are going to be going at it with, and I think this is going to be a lot of fun. Probably going to get heated. Lewis, he's known to get a little loud. AJ's a little more calm, a little bit more collected, but he might pick it up too. So it'll be interesting. Guys, good morning, and thanks for joining me for this. How you guys doing?
I'm good. How are you?
How are you?
Oh, I'm good. This might get me pretty fired up for 5 a.m., but I like it. I like where we're going to go with this. So let's get right into it. I know we were talking about this one all week long, getting amped up, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But the very first topic, grooming talent and man management. All right, so this is the first topic we're going to be talking about Allegri and his successes, or maybe some of his shortfalls, and that's going to be on Lewis's side, and then AJ, of course, will be pro Allegri. So who wants to kick us off on man management and grooming talent? Lewis. All right.
Yeah, that's good with you, AJ. So I think when you take Allegri as a coach, there's pre-Cardiff and post-Cardiff. Because pre-Cardiff, Allegri was a completely different coach in terms of like talent, man management, very, very good. Some things happened with the squad and it kind of messed with him a little bit, but there was a change there in the post-Cardiff Allegri. And I think pre-Cardiff, you could look at things like, he'd use Asamoah as a left back or Paduin as a right back. And like, actually they would play pretty decent for them. Infamously, that group stage game against Olympiacos, where we needed a win and we were without Lichtsteiner or Evra, and Asamoah and Paduin played there and actually played really well. It was one of Allegri's like stronger points, and you would see it like even the Cardiff run, he would use Marquisio and Pjanic or Khedira and Pjanic, or, he would change kind of the front four around. Pajica was a player that was really promising that he utilized a lot. He was really good. What happened was, though, post-Cardiff, there was something that like switched in his head a little bit. And it was like, he couldn't figure out that next year how to play Higuain and Dybala. It was infamous that, both of them would get frustrated with him. Like, you'd see Dybala come off and he would give him a look all the time. Like, he couldn't figure out that balance. And then, even the next year with Benatia and Bonucci, where he told Manny Benatia, hey, you're still the guy. Like, this guy has to prove himself. And then Benatia never saw the field, which, ultimately ended up costing us when both Chiellini and Bonucci went down in the Champions League. So I think that for somewhere that switched, and I don't know if that's a personnel thing or if that's an Allegri thing, but, at one point it was really, really good. And then it just kind of like shifted a little bit. And even you look like, you could argue that some of the signs, like Bernardeschi was a very promising player, right? He had a good first year. Second year, kind of moves out of position. It's never been the same. It's a weird kind of thing. So I don't know if that's a talent thing. Could be a Max thing. Something switched post-Cardiff for me that was very different.
Huh. That's kind of interesting. AJ, your thoughts in regards to what Lewis was saying, and your own personal opinion on his ability to groom talent and man management.
I mean, a couple of things. Like first, Bernardeschi, he did not turn into like Lionel Messi once Allegri left, so he's still having like the same problem. So to say that, he declined because of Allegri, I think is unfair. And also, he's had his better 2 years with Juve under Allegri. So in his first season, he was okay. And his second season, he was good in the first half and he played well against Atletico. But then he kind of declined. And his decline continued under Sarri and under Pirlo. So that's one thing. And fitting Dybala into the team, people used to think that it's an Allegri thing. But Pirlo is having the same problem right now. So even though we play with like three at the back, Dybala is still like hard to fit within the team, and we play overall better with Morata. So I don't think those two things are Allegri problems. They are the same problems that Pirlo is facing right now. And in terms of man management, I think he did a good job overall. He did not use many young talents, but Pogba thrived a lot under him. Even Bentancur, he was much more steady, I think, in his first 1 or 2 years. And also Moise Kean, so he was also decent under Allegri. He did prefer older players, but I think because he's a results-driven manager, he put the personnel who thought would give him the best result, as opposed to like, let's develop young talents. And even though I don't think there are that many, great talents in the under 23, we were kind of excited about Frabotta, and then it turned out to be kind of different. So, yeah, I think he did well overall in terms of man management, and the youngsters that he used, like Pogba at the time and Bentancur, they were good enough for Juve at the time. So he did not risk using someone who is not good enough for Juve.
Yeah, what's interesting is Dybala thrived under Sarri, though, and played the same system as Allegri in a 4-3-3, right?
But
so
I think
it's kind of weird. Lewis, go ahead.
What I was going to say is the year that I'm talking about, because the last year, there's a whole number of reasons why Dybala didn't play. I mean, A, he wasn't fit. But B, too, the Ronaldo thing is a difficult partnership, which, as Al pointed out, Sarri fixed. But the year I'm talking about, the Cardiff year, Dybala had 21 goals, 10 assists. Higuain had like 19 goals, like 11 assists. So those are your two best players. And if you can't find a system that, excels your two best players, something's broke there. And the year before that in Cardiff, they played a system where they both worked and played very, very well. So that's where I couldn't figure out, like, what's the disconnect here? And one of the problems was, and this is a good argument here, is in the Real Madrid tie, when we went down 4-1 in the first leg, Dybala played, Higuain, they played them together. Dybala was awful. They took him off the pitch, and they won 3-0, right? But that whole season building up to there was games where he was pulling him and dropping him and playing Higuain. Instead of sticking to your guns and being like, hey, we're playing this way, and we're going to bring someone off the bench. Sarri did that a number of times and still got the best out of him. There was this weird kind of like, we need to still play them together. We can't do this. He shifted a little bit post-Cardiff. And I would say, probably Bernardeschi, you're right, probably a bad example. But they do there's some tinkering that happens. I'll give Allegri, Stuaro's best 2 years probably ever as a footballer came under Allegri. Like the first 2 years he was at Juventus. So he was able to insert players and get some good out of them. But there is kind of an argument saying, hey, post-Cardiff, your big thing was you had a good team, a team that probably should have been a little bit better than it was. And you wonder, where was the disconnect there? Like, how can you go from getting smacked 4-1 to Real Madrid to winning 3-0 and then just completely flipping the lineup there with Dybala and Higuain? And it was one of the things that I think hurt him. And I think, that's a larger Dybala argument. But in that specific season, your two best players, you have to be able to find a place for them on the pitch. And I think that's a little bit of an Allegri thing. It comes down to, there's almost too much balance, right?
I mean,
AJ, your thoughts?
Yeah. So to say that Dybala thrived under Sarri, so that's true. But at the same time, I feel that it came at the expense of the team overall playing worse. So I think any Juve fan would pick any of Allegri's past seasons over Sarri's season. So the balance was just not there. So maybe having Dybala comes at the expense of losing this balance.
But they had Dybala 2 seasons. They went all the way to the Champions League final, and then they almost went all the way against Real Madrid if what's that referee? The English guy doesn't give that off.
Michael Oliver.
Michael Oliver.
Yeah, sorry, therapy has blocked him out for me. But I didn't want to put Mark Clatterberg because it's the only one I know. But
I mean, Allegri overall is a very flexible manager, and every time someone got injured, we did not feel that, suddenly we started losing game like what's happening now with Pirlo, where we don't have Bonucci, Cuadrado, and Arthur, and suddenly we lost against Napoli and we lost against Porto. But during Allegri's time, every time someone got injured, it did not feel that way. And now to say that something magical happened during Cardiff, I don't think it's that simple, because even the 2 seasons after, we still won Serie A and we got like over 90 points, I believe, in both seasons. We did not get lucky in the Champions League, but still we beat Spurs and we came close to beating Real Madrid. And then in the season after, we still eliminated Atletico. Like, we do have like good Champions League memories post Cardiff. But I think the problem is that Allegri set the bar very high for himself, because he reached the final twice, and people started thinking that, this is what you're supposed to every year, and if you don't win everything, then you're out. While the bar, I think, is much lower for Pirlo, like, just develop young talents, make it to top 4, win a couple of games in Champions League, and you're good to go. So I feel it's a bit of an unfair assessment.
That's actually very valid, because I do think that Allegri was given a little bit of a higher bar than he was expected. Because and you could attest out of this as well, like, when he joined, if you had said we're going to win the double for 4 years and then reach 2 finals, I think any Juve fan would be like, you're nuts. Like, there was no track history to that.
Yeah,
so, very valid point.
And then in terms of management, though, would Allegri be able to run a squad that had more depth? Like, if we start looking at a roster and we go through a season like we are now, and you have all these mouths to feed, would he be able to? Like, rotation was kind of one of the things with Allegri. Yeah, he was flexible and he could adapt and whatnot, but he didn't really rotate a whole bunch, did he?
I think he did.
Particularly in that the last year. I mean, it was really weird, because the last 2 years, so he knew, but specifically the last year, but the last 2 years, right? He knew he had then there's no Bonucci, so he had Chiellini, he had Barzali, he had Benatia, and he had Rugani, and he played them all kind of like all 4. He rotated a little bit. The next year comes, he's got Chiellini, Bonucci, Benatia. In the first half of the year, you just never see Benatia, and he would say in press conference, he'd joke, we need to protect Chiellini, we have to protect his minutes. And then he would play 4 games in a row and then get hurt. And it was a weird thing where it was like, there was never and we don't know like the inside of a dressing room, right? We don't know what goes on. But, from what we've heard in interviews and stuff, it was almost like there was a promise, like, hey, you'll play, or hey, you'll do this. Like, he has to know that Chiellini, who was hurt most of the previous year.
Oh, AJ.
What's going to happen?
I think Allegri is a results-driven person. He's going to select the personnel who will that will get you the results. And to say, I don't know why is it a problem that in the first half of the year, Benatia didn't play. I don't think that's like a big issue. In the 18-19 season, we were the last team to lose in Europe's top 5 leagues. So I don't think the last year under Allegri was terrible by any means. And
I'm not saying
we've just lost Alberto.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's terrible. Like, what I'm saying is that team, to me, like, when I look at it on paper, right, that team was good enough to win the Champions League. Like, if you look who won the Champions League, that team was good enough. Like Liverpool and Spurs, it was good enough. I think so.
I think
just look at the names on paper. You have Mario Mandzukic, who played in the World Cup final. You had Ronaldo, who's one of the greatest players of all time. You had Matuidi, World Cup winner. Khedira, World Cup winner. Emre Can, regular to the German national team. Marilyn Pjanic was still one of the best players at the time. He's one of the midfielders around, at least in Serie A. You had Chiellini. You had Bonucci. You had Joao Cancelo, promising young player. You had Alexandro. Okay, I'll give you that one. And you had Chesney, who's a good keeper. You go to Liverpool. Liverpool's midfield was James Milner, Jordan Henderson, and Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain with Wijnaldum. And Oxlade-Chamberlain had like one knee. So you could say like our midfield wasn't great, but that's not a great midfield. That's just a unit, right? Like I think that Juventus team could win on paper if it's given the right style. And even if you like some of the backup players, Benatia, like Paulo Dybala, who at the time was a little different than now, but at the time Paulo Dybala was considered like a world-class player in context, came off the bench. So that team, I think, Moise Kean, promising young player, that team had a little bit more potential than we give it credit for. I think that kind of like the way it played, hurts it a little bit. But if you look at some of the other teams, like the team that knocked us out, Ajax, blew a 4-1 lead to a Spurs team that didn't have Harry Kane. It's not like it was a world-beating team. It was a group of promising youngsters. It's not like it was this undoable thing where we ran into like Pep's Barcelona and they beat us in the quarterfinals. Like it's not crazy to say like, hey, that team could have mixed it up and won. And you even think about like the team the year before that, right? That Real Madrid team was really good. They've won 4 Champions Leagues in 5 years. But the last year was probably the worst team that won the Champions League. Like, even if you watch the final, like they had no business winning that final. They got 2 mistakes from Karius, and we ran them off the park in that second leg. And that's a credit to Allegri, but like it just feels like there was a little bit missing from that last team in that last year. And I don't know, like they won the league by like 20 points. You just say like quarterfinal to Ajax is like a good result. It's not. I think that, whatever happened behind the scenes, it feels like he might have lost the locker room at the end there, just a little bit.
Okay, so I don't think Ajax. I don't think that Ajax team is the type of team that it's embarrassing to lose to, because that same team eliminated Real Madrid and in a much more embarrassing way, and then came so close to reaching the final, and they had so many young talents and incredible midfield. So that's on Ajax. And I don't think, I remember many people were saying, Pjanic, Khedira, Matuidi is a terrible midfield. We can never do anything with this midfield. So I don't think it's fair to say that those were one of the top midfielders in the world around that time, because other teams, even like Ajax, had a much better midfield. And in 2018, we came so close to eliminating Real Madrid, and it was basically a ref call that changed the whole thing in the 90th minute. And also, like from Allegri's last season to Sarri's first season, we did not get better once we replaced Allegri. So to say that, Allegri was the problem, he should be replaced and then we'll achieve our goals. But we got eliminated in a much worse way against Lyon. And unfortunately, the same thing might happen against Porto. So getting eliminated by an Ajax team, which eliminated Real Madrid and came close to reaching the final, is not the same but as getting eliminated by Lyon, who were the 7th in the French league. And after Allegri left, we added De Ligt, and many people were complaining about Khedira, Matuidi. So we got Ramsey and we got Rabiot and De Ligt. So De Ligt is obviously one of the top defenders in the world, but that did not help us in achieving better than what Allegri achieved. And now we're currently 4th in Serie A, and we're only 2 points above Napoli. Napoli, there is talks of sacking Gattuso. So we're much closer to missing out on top 4 than to winning Serie A. So we're not doing better without Allegri. So I know you may say like, oh, maybe Allegri had better players, but to be fair to him, from 2015 to 2019, almost like 9 or 10 players changed, but the results are still the same. We win Serie A, we do well in the Champions League, and we get eliminated in like a heartbreaking, unlucky way.
Well, I'll push back there is context. And what you didn't provide there is context. Because what happened is you had a great midfield. Best midfield of the decade, undisputedly, came under Max Allegri. Pogba, Vidal, Pirlo, Marquisio, the best midfield of the decade. We've never topped it. His second run was our second best midfield of the decade, which was a two-man midfield that alternated between Pjanic, Marquisio, and Khedira. And I say that because his first 2 years, Khedira was a very good player. His third year, fourth year, he started getting hurt more, wasn't as good. But his first 2 years, he was a very good player. In fact, his third year, he was like one of our leaders in goals. So I'm not even going to give him that much shit for his third year, like most people do. So if you provide some context there, that changes a little bit. Now, I will agree. Sarri was a bad hire. And at the time, like, you know, I would say that, hey, he brings great football, but he's not Max Allegri. Like, you had a team that you thought was going to win the Champions League. That was a bad hire. And that's
Do you think Allegri should have stayed?
No. And I'll say why I think Allegri shouldn't have stayed. It's not necessarily Sarri was an upgrade. I think that Allegri's time had just finished. With coaches at some point, 5, 6, 7 years, it feels like the message isn't resonating. And I felt that way towards the end of his campaign. I think he's a great coach. I think he's an all-time coach. But, you know, at the time, I would say no. In hindsight, if you were to tell me, hey, keep Allegri 1 year or bring in Sarri, I would say, hey, keep Allegri 1 year. But, you know, like I've said on the podcast before, like, I'm not opposed to him returning. It depends on the context of how he returns. Are we going to play how we did 2-3 years ago? I think it's more about style. And I think that if you look at the big European clubs, it's shifted a little bit. And I'm not talking about beautiful football. Forget all that. Yeah. No, that's later. But
that's perfect, Lewis, because we are going to discuss that.
Yeah.
We are going to get into just the overall style and the belief of, you know, the other competitions and everything, and where Allegri stands with his style. Real quick, there's some good stuff coming in the comments. Everybody jumping in. Luca thinks, myself and AJ called each other before picking outfits today and whatnot. And like I told Lewis, I'm not picking teams or anything. We just happen to support this. Honestly, this is one of my favorites, though. So, but yeah, you got some discussion happening here in the comments. But style of play, Lewis, you were just about to jump onto that, and I'm going to let you fire away with your beliefs in regards to Allegri's overall style.
We're going to agree a little bit, AJ. Beautiful football is bullshit. I mean, Guardiola played beautiful football. Not everyone plays beautiful football. I understand that. But what I'm saying is, Allegri played kind of a pragmatic, suck you in and counterattack style, which is fine. At the time, the first 3 years, it was great. Even maybe the fourth year, it worked really well at times. In the Atletico game, it worked a lot where they played high press and they sucked teams in and they countered attack. You know, it was great. But if you look at football as a whole, this new modern approach, which is what Bayern Munich used and what Real Madrid used, and even like Barcelona a little bit under Enrique, which is where you high press, you win the ball back, and you go out wide and you cross it in, is kind of a newer style. And I think part of the reason Allegri hasn't found a job since, you know, he left Juventus is that teams are looking, football has shifted into this more modern style. And I think that Juventus saw that and they were like, hey, why aren't we winning the Champions League? Is it the coach? Well, we have one of the best coaches around, right? You know, winning percentage-wise would say that Allegri is a great coach. Okay, if it's not, you know, winning percentage in that, what's the next thing? It's style. And that's what they've been looking for. Now, you could argue, hey, if given the personnel, maybe he could play that style. But the indication was that he didn't want to play that style, or at least they didn't see it for it. And that's why he got sacked, is because they wanted a more modern, I love that comment, but a more modern, you know, style, which is this high pressing, you know, this is where football's going. Let's try and jump ahead of it.
Okay. I think it's unfair to say that Allegri style was always boring. In 2015, 2016, 2017, when we had better midfielders, we played much better. So I'm pretty sure any fan right now would happily go back to that 2015 team. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that so far we've tried 2 coaches, Sarri and Pirlo, with the goal of, let's play more modern football, but that didn't work. So maybe it's simply the personnel that you have. Like if Guardiola was the coach of Juve, I really doubt that he would turn Bernardeschi into a top talent. So we've tried 2 coaches. We've tried Sarri, and now we've tried Pirlo with the goal of playing a modern style of football, but it did not work. And currently under Pirlo, it's coming at the expense of worse results. So Allegri stayed with Juve for 5 years, and in 3 of those he played well. But once the midfield kind of declined, he adapted his game into a more pragmatic approach, but he still got the results. And I remember we played so well against Spurs, and we played so well against in the second leg against Atletico. But at the same time, one thing that I want to pick up on is that when we talk about Khedira, Matuidi, Pjanic, when it's people who hate Allegri, not necessarily you, Luis, but people say, Allegri has had top players when they want to criticize him. He did not win the Champions League, even though he had top players. But if it was like some other coach, then they would say, or a coach that they like, they say, who can do anything with Khedira, Pjanic, Matuidi? This is a terrible midfield. We need to replace them. But it's, to be fair to Allegri, like regardless of who the personnel were, he got the results, and the style was boring at times, but it's the one that got him the results. So, and at Juve, winning is all that matters. So I don't know why every time, like we finish with Allegri, we won Serie A every season, and we got over 90 points. But at the same time, people think, there's something broken here that needs to be fixed in order to win the Champions League, which I think is a little unfair. Yeah.
I just want to chime in with a couple things. Beautiful football right off the bat. I think beautiful football, it doesn't have to be this all-out attack thing and like you're playing a game of FIFA and you're always on the throttle. You can have a counter-attacking style. If you execute it fantastically, that could be beautiful football. We had that under the BBC there, where we were shut down artists. You could take a 1-0 lead from the 20th minute, and I'd have full confidence we don't even need another one, and even the lockdown style would be beautiful. I think the feeling became somewhere along the lines when your team starts to see a change and a shift where all of a sudden it wasn't so sure, that you were going to be able to close ones out. Do you start to change that? And it was that desire out of the fans wanting Allegri to see that maybe, hey, we're starting to, that's starting to not be our bread and butter. It's starting to not work. And the risk of not being able to go the distance in these European competitions that way anymore is what kind of started to get people thinking maybe we need to be on the throttle a bit more, because it's tough if you just don't if you're not brave enough in that competition. I think beautiful football in general is misconstrued when people speak to it. I don't think it has to be just all out attack for one, but something shifted. Luca even made a remark there that somewhere along the lines, that football we were playing, it became easy to beat, easier to beat and get scored on and whatnot. So it's a tough one when you talk about styles. And the other thing is too, just people's own general belief in Europe, because let's face it, Allegri domestically was fantastic.
Dominant.
It was phenomenal. It was always Europe. So was his style of play, was that going to transfer over into Europe? Yes, he made those 2 finals, but after that, it's then the argument becomes players Does he need other guys? Was he overachieving with what he had? And then, the league. Was domestic just not where it was? Were we just miles ahead of everybody else in there? And was it too easy? I'm going to let you guys kind of go on that. I know Lewis wants to get going here with that. So
right before we move on, I just would like to break down, because I was just thinking about this while you were talking about it. If you look at the last three two-legged Allegri coach, this is how they started. The first one, we kind of played a little pragmatic and got blown off the park by Real Madrid. In the second leg, he played high press, full throttle, and we almost beat them 3-0 at their own place, right? Like it wasn't necessarily beautiful, but it was kind of that more modern style. Atletico Madrid, kind of same way. We played pragmatic. We got beat 2-0. We got nowhere near them and smacked them in the second leg when we switched it. In Ajax, it never switched. And I think that's where management was like to themselves, okay, is there something wrong here? Like, is there something that hey, in the away tie, we're playing really pragmatic and we're not playing how we're playing in the second leg. Is it broken? And you can argue it's still broken. It could be a player's thing, but that always comes down to the manager first. It's just kind of the reality of football. Al, you brought up, the next category, which is the league and stuff. Juventus's overall financial dominance compared to previous years is very different. And if you think about the league, if you look at the teams that we competed with, it was mainly Napoli and occasionally Roma, right? For the entire 5 years that Allegri was in charge. Not to say there weren't some great teams, because that Napoli team the year post-Cardiff was a great team that probably deserved to win the trophy that year. They basically handed it to us after they got that 1-0 win. But if you look at what Juventus as a club was able to do, the year of Cardiff, right? Which, the year before that, when we won 25 games, that was the closest we've probably ever been to losing the Scudetto it was one of the closest times we almost lost the Scudetto. The next year, management went and got Napoli's best player, who finished second that year, Higuain, who did 40 goals that season. And then they got Roma's best player, Pjanic, who was the third place team. So I think the league different. That doesn't happen now. That doesn't even happen last year. That is peak Juventus at their power, where it's, hey, we've won the Scudetto 5 times. You guys are never winning it. We're going to go get your best 2 players and just take out their rivals. And I think that might be kind of like the difference between now and there, where it's the Milan clubs, and there's a little bit more edge to not give in and sell your best players to Juventus, because there's a little bit of hatred there, a little bit of rivalry. Also, you look at the investments, like Murder Milan have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in the last 2 years. AC Milan, not as much, but they have like an actual project that they've been building for at least a year or two. Whereas Napoli or Roma, there's not enough stability to build a project there, right? They're kind of like they're there for 2 or 3 years and they dip off and one replaces the other. So I think that in context, there's a little difference. Not to take away from anything Allegri did, because winning 4 domestic doubles is ridiculous, 4 straight years. Like that's Bayern Munich level shit, like in a great league. So,
yeah.
But
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
AJ, are you gonna get your thoughts here on the domestic league and strength on it overall and whatnot?
Yeah, I do agree that other teams in Serie A are now much better than they were during Allegri's time. So that's I do agree on. Now, when we said that we're financially much stronger than other teams, I think Allegri should get credit in that aspect, because reaching the Champions League final twice gets you lots of money, which you can invest in the coming years. So a part of the reason why we were in a good shape financially to get Ronaldo is the good results we achieved in the Champions League. So some people say, oh, I'd rather lose in the group stage than lose in the final, but I totally disagree with that. I'd rather lose 5 finals than get eliminated. Because by reaching the final, you get so much money which you can invest in other players. And given that we were poor in the Champions League after Allegri in the last 2 years, So we got eliminated in the round of 16 against Lyon, and this could happen again against Porto. And there is a chance, even though I don't think it's going to happen, that we miss out on top 4. So this means that striving for a better style at the expense of results will hurt us financially, and the Milan clubs will have much more power in the coming years if we continue this decline. So I think that Allegri did so well by using the players that he had, and there was a lot of change in personnel, but the results stayed the same in Serie A. And one thing that I liked about him is that regardless of what the circumstances were, like in that 2018 famous game against Inter, when Napoli were so close to winning Serie A, he figured out that he can change something during the game against Inter, and we won 3-2, and we ended up winning Serie A. So I think one of the weaknesses of Pirlo currently is that I don't think it's much of a comeback team. So it's the type of team that takes the lead and then maintains it. Against Porto, once we conceded 1 goal, like the entire mentality of the team kind of collapsed. But under Allegri in Serie A, even if we were behind, that at some point you were going to equalize and you were going to win the game. And we did it like so many times. So I think, yeah.
Is that a way to make a living, though? And that's where it became, that's where the question really became from fans, because it seemed like we were going down all time, especially in like the 2 legs, and that's where it became a champs. It's like, man, we're always seem to be, there started to become this trend where the first leg was like, oh, we didn't put our best foot forward, and then you'd have to bank on that almost happening. And I think that's kind of what sparked, man, maybe we need that change in philosophy, right? But you said something there, AJ, and it's this current decline. Do we think we're really in a decline, though, or are we just in a transition that began under Allegri in his last actual season?
I think that it starts in that season. It gets worse, but it starts there. I think there were some things that – so that team was brought in to win the Champions League that year. And I think that's part of the reason he got sacked was when they did it, they were like, okay, we're going to have to clean up this mess. And if you even look, like some of the extensions that they made that year, like if they win the Champions League that year, they probably don't make, like Mario Mandzukic, a few other ones. And they made some weird moves that year. And I think it was in this vein that we're going to win this now. Like, you don't bring Ronaldo in to win in 3 years. Like, you were hoping we're going to pick off the guy that just won 3 years in a row, and we're going to get that 4th one in a row, right? I think that was kind of logic. There was even, like, when Ronaldo signed, there was an article that came out because that summer there was a rumor that they were going to cash in on Dybala and Pjanic, right? They were going to maybe cash in on both. Dybala was interested in maybe moving to Real Madrid or Barcelona. It could all be fantasy football, but for hypothetical, so that was there. And then Ronaldo came, and everyone was like, okay, this is the year that we get over the hump. We're all staying, right? So I think, obviously that didn't happen. And yeah, Luca's right, because screw that stupid logo. Sorry. But so I think that's like kind of where it started, where team was built here. It had an old, aging, experienced squad. Let's build it here. Let's win now. And then after we win, it doesn't really matter if we transition because we won what hopefully would have been the treble we were so seeking. So I think Al brings up a good point. What I'd say is the difference in Serie A and league strength is that Napoli and Roma structurally were not great, management teams. ADL fires his coach every 2-3 years. Like Roma, they have a new owner every 3 years. So, but you look now and then you see like Napoli, who are having a so-so year, they're 5th, right? They're 2 points off of us. They were able to go get players that were 70, 80, 90 million euros. That didn't happen 3 or 4 years ago. Your 5th place team didn't do that, right? Like even if it was Milan or Merda, they still didn't do that. Like now that the teams are able to spend more money, they can invest a little bit deeper. And I think part of the reason we are where we are now is the fact that Juventus under COVID got crushed, and they have a lot of bad contracts they have to get out that started in that year. And that could be a management thing. That could be a Allegri thing. I think it kind of goes hand in hand a little bit.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, so going back to what Alberto asked, which is this a decline or a transition? For me, the definition of the decline is very simple. If you have worse results, then you're declining. So under Allegri, we were in first place, and now we're in Serie A. We are in fourth place. I think in terms of results, it's fair to say that this is Juve's worst year since 2012. And I think it's naive to assume that it can only get better from here. We tell ourselves like this, like every week, oh, this is a transition. It's going to get better. Like at some point, Pirlo's system will work. I think it's kind of naive to assume that this will happen for sure. If you look at what happened with Lampard, at Chelsea. He did so well in the first year and outperformed the expectations. In the second year, everything suddenly collapsed, and they had to get an experienced coach. So it is a transition, but I wouldn't be surprised if we miss out on Serie A and we continue to get very similar results in the year after. I think what the management should have done is keep Allegri, and once we miss out on Serie A or something like that, then you fire him at that point. But I think it's too risky to make a change when you are outperforming everyone else in Serie A.
So my question for you, AJ, is what was Sarri then? Because Sarri won Serie A. He had a record point total. He won in probably the craziest circumstances you can think of, which is they literally shut down football for 3 months. Yeah, he got eliminated in the Champions League, but is Sarri then a transition, or is he a decline?
You mean going from Allegri to Sarri, or?
Yeah, but just like from Allegri to Sarri to Pirlo, is Sarri a transition, or is he a decline? Because he did what you were saying is like, hey, we can let Allegri go because he won the domestic league, right? Well, Sarri did everything domestically you could possibly do. He lost a weird domestic cup. It was the second game after COVID. Like, Juventus didn't look fit for that. So what?
I mean, I would have kept Sarri instead of getting Pirlo, to be honest.
Wow.
So I know this is controversial.
Okay.
And I'm saying this because we're currently not doing better in terms of results. So that's one key thing. And Sarri didn't get any of the players that he wanted. So the personnel that he had did not fit in his system. And we're currently saying similar things about Pirlo. We keep saying, oh, if we get him this player, and that player, then he can implement his system. But Sarri never had that chance in the first place. So I think Pirlo was a very risky choice, and it's kind of hurting us in terms of results right now. But the thing is, we got so used to winning Serie A to the point that we say, oh, we're sure we're going to win Serie A in the end. Pirlo will be fine. We have good players. And one thing that I remember people used to say during Allegri's time is anyone can win Serie A with those players. Now, once we changed coaches, that became kind of different. So people now view winning Serie A as a very big success if it happens, But when it's Allegri, you have to win it like 100%. And if you get eliminated at a later stage in the Champions League by a wrong ref call in the final and all of that, then you're a bad coach and you have to be replaced and Allegri out.
I also think people said that because of the competition. And if you take the last year where we spanked Serie A, like just absolutely obliterated Serie A. And to be honest, the performance against top 6 teams, like they were good. They weren't necessarily great, if put it out. If you look at our team in the last year that he won, Cristiano Ronaldo was our best player. Napoli's best player was Dries Mertens. That's like Dries Mertens isn't even like a tier 2 player. He's like a tier 3 player, maybe tier 4. So there's a huge drop off between that and the rest of the competition. And to say that, you could even take, players that didn't play. Paulo Dybala still starts in most teams in Serie A, even though he was a fringe player in that last season. You could argue that Marilyn Pjanic would start in most teams in Serie A. Our personnel was a lot better than the rest of the league. And I think that's where fans say that. I don't necessarily agree with that statement. I think that you have a point there, AJ. Not anyone can win Serie A, but it's a much, much different league now than it was before. I mean, you didn't have to have midfields of Barella, Brozovic. Like Christian Eriksen's a six man on that midfield at Murda. Like you didn't have teams like that.
Yeah, I think. Hey, debate that sorry thing because guys are making comments. I think Sarri didn't have the locker room, and that's really hard to say. Bring in guys for a guy because you'd have to look at replacing so many. He just didn't have the guys behind him. And to be honest, it's hard to kind of use that as an argument because he won Serie A, because I feel like we didn't necessarily win it, but everybody else shit the bed and didn't take it, because I thought I thought we played worse under Sarri than we do under Pirlo. That's my personal opinion. I think the football was much worse. But that's another hot take, I think, there. That might be actually discussion. Eric coming in here. Sarri was a sweaty sack of shit. Hired after a long night out, and Agnelli was drunk. That Calcio boy I think Sarri was a failed experiment. I think his man management was a problem. Yes, it's that's a tough one. So league strength again. You go to league strength, and even going back to Sarri's season, everybody else dropped the ball, but it was such a weird season because of the whole COVID thing and the break and everything. So it was a really, really weird one. But man, this is some good stuff. You guys. You guys did your homework. You're going out. I like it. We got to go to something that was a little bit discussed earlier was Champions League, bringing up Cardiff, which I hate to do, but Lewis went there very, very early, which is
I had a beer last night.
Why didn't we get over the hump with him? And many still say to this day we should have got rid of Allegri right after Cardiff. And not even bringing up the whole locker room scenario and the rumors about something going on, but that second half, everybody remembers the second half. It was just like someone hit the lights out and whatnot. But why did we not get over the hump with him? And would it have been the move to get rid of him after Cardiff, as many felt after that time? Who wants to kick us off?
AJ, you want to go or I'll go?
Fire it off.
You go.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so here's my thing. I actually think that Cardiff is a bad 50-50, because I think that there's an argument to say, hey, like the individual players kind of cost us Cardiff. Bonucci, Dani Alves kind of aren't great people in general. They're not great leaders, right? Like that can also be an Allegri problem. Like you could say, oh, that could fall on the manager. I don't think that necessarily is. And to me, Cardiff was an overachievement, right? Like that team is good, but it didn't have the depth that Real Madrid had. Like getting there was Real Madrid brought off the bench. They brought off Gareth Bale, Marco Asensio, and they had Isco. Like, there's just like their midfield had 4 top-tier midfields. It was like ours in Berlin a little bit more. I think that the over the hump with Allegri is the could have been, the what ifs, right? So if you take the year before Cardiff, which probably wasn't as good as the team, but was a good unit, like it went on that ridiculous run in the second half. The tie before that, they played Bayern Munich, who went up 2-0 at 70 minutes. They destroyed us in the first leg. Allegri made 2 changes. We tied it. And then the next leg, we were up 2-0. Morata and Juan Cuadrado for 70 minutes battered them on the counterattack. Allegri pulled them both off, and we could see the 4 goals right afterwards. Like 2 in the remaining 20 minutes. And it just completely changed. We went right back into we're going to sit back, we're going to defend, and got smacked by Douglas Costa and Thomas Muller, which unfortunately led to us signing Douglas Costa. But that's another story. The year before that in Berlin, in hindsight, Luis Enrique has been asked about the Berlin final. And he was asked, hey, how did you win that final? And he said the game plan from the get-go was to wait for Juventus to come out of their shell, because they do – Allegri's kind of tactics is you drop back and you counter, right? And it happens in spurts. And when it happened in spurts – Barcelona just snapped them right on the counter. That was their whole game plan. Was this is how we're going to beat that. So they kind of knew coming in. And one of the things that kind of bothered me about that team was it was really, really pragmatic. And then when it wasn't, it just completely abandoned everything that it made good. And you can argue, hey, Chiellini missed the final, but Barzali's not like a terrible adjustment. Barzali, Bonucci, Evra, Lichtsteiner is a good back line. So I think there was a little bit of prep there in the beginning that cost us. But I won't give him too much shit for that. But I think it's the knockout stages, the what could have been. The team for Ajax, the team from the year after Cardiff, where it's like, hey, if you can almost rout Real Madrid 3-0 on their home pitch, what happened in the first leg? Well, we got it completely wrong in the first leg, right? But that could be, that was the thing that Pirlo was testing out. Hey, we know that this team looks better with the number 9. Like, why don't we try that, right? Like, what's the difference? It's a difference in approach. And I think that, like the finals, you can argue, hey, we lost the better teams and we got a little unlucky in one versus the other. But the what could have beens, I think, are the ones that, really bother Juventus fans.
Yeah.
Okay.
You had a good point there. I mean, the team being stretched, when you talk about depth and whatnot, that is a feather in Allegri's cap, I must say. Like, I agree. If you look at the bench players we were subbing in comparison,
yeah,
it's night and day, right? That's a feather in his cap. However, if we remember back to that final, he switched completely from what he went with that got him there.
Mm-hmm.
And he changed, and he made that change, and it was questionable to say the least. And I felt like he lost himself. And it was like, why is he giving up faith in himself, or what's he doing? Like, that switch, even tactically, seemed off. And
which final?
The question was brought up. Yeah.
Oh.
And the question was brought up, is he just not, for a coach to do that, which was just so strange. It just felt like maybe he was losing himself in the moment. Maybe he wasn't there, right? It was just weird. And yeah, after going into that Shelley end too, it was just strange. But both sides of it there, right? Stretching and getting to that stage with that team, especially with the lack of depth, huge for him, but kind of lost himself in that final for me. So it's weird. But AJ,
yeah,
fire away.
So Allegri stayed at Juve for 5 years. In the 2015 year against Berlin, you remember the Pogba penalty that was not given by Dani Alves. In the 2016 year with Bayern, a goal for Morata was not. He was onside, but it was ruled offside. That would have made the game like 3-0, and it would be game over because Bayern would need like 4 goals. I don't like to use like refereeing excuses, but just to be fair. And then we know what happened with Michael Oliver in 2018. So that's 3 out of 5 years. Okay. Now, if we look at Juve in the Champions League before Allegri and Juve in the Champions League after Allegri, it's not like we were killing it in finals before Allegri. We already had lost like 5 finals before him. And in 2014, we got eliminated in the group stage with Galatasaray, against Galatasaray. And let's keep in mind that we still had Pogba, Pirlo, Vidal, and Marquisio. And Pirlo was a year younger. So Allegri took those same players and made it all the way to the final, and then something happened. In Champions League, you do need luck. So it happens all the time. And if we look at the Champions League after Allegri, the elimination was against Lyon was worse than all of the eliminations during Allegri's time. So I think it's unfair to say that once Allegri reaches the final and then something goes wrong, or if we reach like the round of 8 and a stupid ref call changes things, that this is on Allegri, he's a bad coach, he should be fired. And if we get someone else, then he's going to be able to achieve all of these things and going to win the final. I think it's unfair because he came so close to being like the best Juve manager of all time. And if one of these ref calls went the other way, we would be having a very different conversation than we're having right now.
Okay, I want to push back because you were
I just want to I think fortune favors the brave, though. And even if you look at the Michael Oliver situation, we were in an opportunity to take that tie, and as soon as we got that leveler, we shut it down. We were in, full clothes, like let's hang on to this and get through it, and shit like that happens, and that's why the question started to arise: is he gonna try and be safe
I
all
mean,
the
it's
time? Is he just not brave enough, right?
I think it's
In the moves, and some of the subs that come out, they send that signal, right? So that's just a quick thought for me.
the dynamics.
The
The
continue.
the dynamics of those games are like super complicated. Like when we went all out attack against Barcelona, we got killed on the counter. So maybe the same thing would have happened against Real Madrid. So I'm pretty sure every tactical switch that he had something in mind, and he knew um, it's the best decision at the time. And like a part of, I know people say, "Oh, he's a bad coach because he lost in finals and we choked and all of these things." But a part of being a top club is going through these heartbreaking moments. If you wanna stick with Conte and get eliminated in the group stage, and we focus in Serie A, and everybody forgets about the loss, I think that's not good for the club. And after Allegri, are we doing better in Champions League? So far, the answer is no. If somehow Pirlo wins the Champions League, I'll admit that Pirlo, that maybe having Pirlo as a coach is a good idea, but I just don't see it with the way we played against Porto in the first leg.
Here's something. So, because we're talking about hypotheticals and if things go the wrong way, does Juventus beat Lyon if the game's not at the end of the season? Let's say if it was like a normal tie, right? So at the end of the year, we didn't have Dybala, De Ligt had one shoulder. Do Juventus win that tie without it? It's because if we're talking like hypotheticals, we could say, well, we don't want to make excuses, but we had 3 Aaron penalty calls in 3 years. Like we could also say, well, if COVID doesn't happen and the tie's not at the end, sorry, beats Lyon and he stays another year. I think that the point is, it's not necessarily, oh yeah, we had 3 bad calls. Now I'm sure if you went through every individual games, even the ones that we won, there are penalty shots that didn't go for the other teams, and it just didn't work. Like I think that just happens in football. The Michael Oliver thing, that's an outlier. That one was cruel and should never have happened. The Pogba one, I've watched the replay 100 times. Some people think it's penalty, some people don't. I think that my issue with that game is the fact that Juventus literally they were down 1-0, spent most of it in their own half, scored a goal and thought, okay, now we're going to change this up. And it was like, hey, where was this 70 minutes ago? Like,
I mean, that's one game, and it was the final. And one thing that I've mentioned previously, and you did not comment on it, Conte had that same exact midfield, but got eliminated in the group stage. Nobody said Conte out, right? But when it's Allegri and reached the final and something unlucky happened with a controversial ref call, Allegri out. I think it's unfair, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'll push back on that because I think that at the time there were a lot of people very annoyed with Antonio Conte. But you are right. That is what Allegri did with Conte's team to Berlin. It was incredible. He completely changed the team, the dynamics. They played a little bit more freer. They were less restrictive. But I do think there's a good argument to say, hey, where is that change? Sometimes it felt like he dropped off. And what you said about Bayern Munich, right, where if we get that third goal, Bayern scored 4 goals anyway, so it didn't matter. And if you remember the changes in that game, one of the ones that he brought on was Mario Mandzukic for Alvaro Morata, when Mandzukic was not fit to play in that game, but he played him anyway. I mean, he knows that going in. Mandzukic had 1 quad left. There were some things, and I don't nitpick overall because he was a good coach in the Champions League, but there were some things that you think about to yourself. Why did we do that, or why did we do this?
I mean, I think Allegri's. I think this is something that we agree on, is that his best quality is changing things during the game. So he's very dynamic and he adjusts. So if you remember in the first leg against Bayern, he put Storaro in, and we somehow scored a goal, and we tied 2-2. And everybody said, "Oh, Allegri is a genius. He made those changes, and it worked." Now, if that didn't work, people would say, "Oh, Allegri made this. He put in Storaro. How do you put in Storaro, one of the worst players ever against Bayern?" So he made much better, or the changes that he made during the games, the good changes heavily outnumber the bad changes. So he's at the end of the day, there's no way to tell how things would turn out if you make a change during the game. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You can't say like every change has to be perfect and it has to win the game. At the end of the day, coaches experiment. Sometimes it goes with you, sometimes against you. So if one of those changes, like the one against Real Madrid, if defending worked in our favor, then people would say, "Oh, Allegri is a good coach because he did this, and that." So those changes, there are no guarantees, and his good changes heavily outnumber his bad changes.
Well, that's a good round there, and that's a good round here. This one, AJ's got a lot of good points. Lewis has made some great points too. We gotta pretty much get right down to the nitty gritty. Right now, currently, where we sit with Allegri at the helm, would we be in better shape at this point of the season with him around?
Yes.
Simple yes. Lewis,
I'm gonna say no. I think we'd be exactly the same because
really?
I actually don't think the problem. I mean, you could say that obviously Allegri is a better coach, but I think there's an element of the personnel that's just not up to the standard that it was before.
Say that again. Allegri is what?
I think Allegri is a better coach, but comparing Pirlo and Allegri together, I would never say that because taking a coach that's never coached before versus a coach that's coached like a decade, like you could argue that. I think Max is a great coach, but I think like the debate is more should he have been sacked at the time? Like if you would have sacked Allegri 2 years ago and told me, all right, we're gonna hire a coach that's never coached before in 2 years, I'd been like, no, bring it back for 2 years. But what I'm saying is, like in context with the squad, I just don't think it's up to par to the rest of the teams in Serie A, and I think that's why we are where we're at.
Yeah.
Okay, so with 5 years under Allegri, we won Serie A 5 times and Coppa Italia 4 times. So to say that if Allegri was the coach, we would be in 4th place, I think we're ignoring the history of Allegri with Juve, which was complete dominance in Serie A. Even though the argument for sacking Allegri, I remember it was we want to win in the Champions League and we want to play better, quote unquote, or I don't want to use the word beautiful football. So that was the argument. The argument was not, if Allegri stays, then we will collapse in Serie A. I think everybody believed that if Allegri stayed, we would still win Serie A and by a big margin. And I think if Allegri stayed, then we would be winning Serie A this year, or we would be in 1st place. So that's one thing that 100% sure. Because, like he won it 5 times in a row. So I don't see any reason. And with very different players, like in the first year.
I mean, that was impressive.
Like
won it next year. So,
between the 2015 and 2019 teams, a lot of changes happened, maybe like 8 or 9 players, but the results in Serie A stayed the same. So I don't find any reason to think that, if he stayed, we would be in 4th or 5th place, because the guy was winning it like a match after a match. Like we were so used to winning 10 matches in a row.
Yeah.
Now if we lose next week, I wouldn't be surprised at all. So
here's my counter.
But you guys both
teams had World Cup winners that had really, really great players. Not to say this team doesn't have great players. This team also is never fit. Like there are 5 guys on the injury table every 3 weeks. That was not the case under most of Allegri. And even when it was, they had World Cup winners to come off the bench and replace them. Talk about luxury where we could say a guy that won the World Cup on the German team 2 years later is a washed-up player that we don't need to play. People hate him, Blaise Matuidi. He started a whole World Cup for France where they dominated. That's a luxury. Now you say, look, we go to our bench. We go from Arthur, who's a player that people think will hit their potential. I really rate Arthur. But Barcelona, he was a budding youngster. That's our best midfielder? the drop off is Adrian Rabiot, who's been so most of his career. They're still waiting for him to his potential. So it's a completely different team. And I think the personnel and the credentials of a lot of those teams. I mean, how many times do you see a Mario Mandzukic bail you out of a game, right? Where is that Mario Mandzukic?
The other thing is, you guys both agreed the league strength is, for me, much, much higher, right? And you factor in the roster shift and whatnot. And Allegri, when he brought in Cristiano, and it was supposed to be this like game breaker and whatnot, but it didn't end up being that way. And I think that was where our eyes started to, be open to what was actually happening. And maybe Max was overachieving with what he had. And it started in Max's last season where we started to see this shift. To say that right off the bat, out of the gate, he would have done better, no question. I think we would be far better prepared as a team going into matches for the opponent or whatnot. Would the results still be there, though? I see a lot that comes down to the players, so I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. I think it's a really, really tough one. My gut wants to be like AJ and say absolutely yes, 100%. He gets those results, no doubt. But there's a big shift, and there's a lot of new players, and I don't know. Would Allegri go back to Sami Khedira? Would Khedira still be around? I don't know. I have no idea.
I also say I put this.
Pirlo said even under Sarri at the beginning. Go ahead, Louis.
I would say that Pirlo. There's a lot of so there's a lot good. There's a lot bad, but the stretch that they went on from the end of December that started the Camp Nou with Barcelona up until Napoli is one of the best stretches we've seen in a while in terms of just results. You go to the Camp Nou, you win 3-0. You beat AC Milan. They lost the Merda, but then beat them in the Coppa Italia. They pulled off some great results. And I'm not saying that makes him a great coach, but I'm saying, though, like with a healthy, complete unit, I would like to see, in like maybe some offseason, I would like to see it. I think that's like, if you look at the terms of this year, which is not having a fit team, not having an offseason, playing every 3 days, would Max be able to manage that the same way? Maybe, but I don't know if that's necessarily a guarantee.
Okay, so one thing is, so we do agree that the league or the top teams in Serie A got better, but let's not forget that the points that we dropped this season were against the worst teams. Fiorentina's only away win this season was against Juve, and we dropped points against the likes of Benevento and Crotone, if I recall correctly. So those were the games that Allegri would win easily. So given that we are like 7 or 8 points behind in the league, I think Allegri would have won those games against those worst sides in Serie A, and we would probably be in first place. And I know we're saying, things were better in the past month. We won every game, but then we lost against Inter, and last week we lost against Napoli. And I think here we're kind of cherry picking by saying, we won those games. It's true that we lost this game, and that game. But at the same time, we're in fourth place, and we're just 2 points away from missing out on top 4. So that's a fact. Even if you win 20 games in a row and then you lose 3 and you're still in the position, that's your place in the league. And all we care about, I think what every fan cares about, is the results. And those stretches during Allegri's time were normal, but he also did well against pretty much like every side in Serie A. So he'd win against the top teams and against the bottom teams. And we got so used to being in first place. But right now, despite all of this positivity, we have McKinney, we have youngsters, we're developing, and all of these things, we are in a worse place in Serie A than we were like last year and even the year before.
It's interesting that you mentioned the 2 points off of fourth place, because we're also a game in hand away from being in the Scudetto race.
And this game, like people usually when they look at the table, they automatically give themselves like 3 points, like we will win this match for sure. But that's not going to happen,
But
you don't know.
Hypothetically, we're 2 points away from being out of the Champions League. So hypothetically, we're 3 points away from being in the title race.
Yeah, I think also,
Napoli have that game.
Also, it would be.
Yeah,
it's a fair shout to make to say that we could potentially be in some issues roster-wise because of the extensions that came at the hand of Allegri with the guys he wanted to keep around too.
I think that's the management
fault. About Allegri did not get the guys he wanted. Allegri, we hung on to guys Allegri wanted. That were some extensions that were very, very questionable, right?
I mean, I think that's the management fault, because if they did have long-term faith in Allegri, then they should not have made those extensions in the first place. So you can't say like, oh, if Allegri does not win the Champions League, I'm gonna sack him. But for now, let's extend Khedira, Mandzukic, etc. So I think that's on the management, but not Allegri.
I think Mandzukic, I agree with, because Agnelli was the one who was like, hey, we should sign Mario Mandzukic. We want him to retire here. I would agree with that one.
I find it hard to believe that Allegri would not be in on players for that comment that came in that was saying Allegri didn't get the guys he wanted. I don't know if I agree with that. And again, we saw this shift when we brought in the best player in the world. We saw the flux begin actually the year prior, because if everybody remembers the year prior, we did not play very well domestically in a league that we considered to be weaker. And it came down to the clutch, the wire there, and Dybala went lights out. And a couple other guys did as well, and we got over the hump there. But it started there where it was like, man, I don't know, these results that were coming so easy for Allegri started to not come so easily. Then you flash forward a year, you bring in the best player in the world, and it arguably got worse. So you start thinking about that, and that's what kind of sparks the whole, I don't know about this guy anymore, because he had a team that he did accomplish all this with, and now we're playing worse with the best player. It's a tough one. I don't know for sure that I could say he would have this team playing fantastic football, or cohesive. And I don't really know if I can say that, because it all kind of started a season before we even got Ronaldo under his wing. So it's a tough one. It's a really, really tough one. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think preparation-wise, game management, we would be better in that sense. The big rivals in Serie A have picked it up. What happened was Juve never made the gap wider at the top. It was like we were getting these results domestically. Things were going well, and we just kind of did this. Whether it's management's fault, but to say Allegri had no say in players or whatnot, I don't really know if I agree. You guys agree that he didn't have say in players that were bringing in and doing anything?
Yeah, I find that hard to believe as well. I will say, though, there was one thing the management did wrong with Allegri, which was after Cardiff, he asked for ball-dominant midfielders and wasn't given it. And that's where I will defend him on that, because he did ask for that after Cardiff and was not given that those players. But, as far as extension goes, I find that hard not to run that past your coach. I also think that his sacking was more unplanned than it was planned. It was kind of like a we lost to Ajax, we're moving on. I don't think they envisioned in 3 years sacking Allegri. I thought that they envisioned a longer term kind of ordeal. We'll win the Champions League this year and then rebuild under a coach that's won the treble or the double, right? Kind of like a Jurgen Klopp with Liverpool kind of thing.
Even if you have the best players, winning the Champions League is not easy. So if you look at Guardiola with Man City, they give him every player he wants, and he's the dream coach of many coaches. But so far he failed to win the Champions League with City. And you don't hear any talks whatsoever of sacking him. I think the fact that Allegri reached 2 finals made people suddenly think, oh, winning the Champions League is a must and it's something that you should do. So I feel that he's kind of a victim of his own success. So if underperforming in the last 2 years in the Champions League under Allegri was actually Allegri's fault, then to prove that, what we need to do is show that after Allegri, a coach will come and will win the Champions League and everything will be great. But so far, that's not happening at all. So in the Champions League, we are doing worse with Sarri and Pirlo than what we did under Allegri. So if it's
It was interesting that you mentioned Pep there, because the difference between Pep and Allegri is what? Pep won the Champions League twice. Allegri's never done it. Even at Milan, which had a great team, never did it. So the difference.
Yeah, but that was in 2012.
I would agree that Pep Guardiola probably should get more pressure than he does at City. That's Manchester City. But there's a little bit of context there. If you're looking at Juventus and you're like, let's say that Pep Guardiola was the coach to get the run they had at Man City. You're in context saying, hey, at one point he could win this title, right? But the issue is with Allegri, you're wondering, hey, he's never won this. Like domestically, he's had success where he's been on this track record.
But how would you compare like Pjanic and Khedira to Iniesta, Xavi, Messi, Prime Messi?
You just made that comparison.
Yeah, he had very top players. So, and Barcelona went to the Champions League after.
Pogba, Vidal, Pirlo, and Marquisio.
The same people Conte couldn't do anything with, right?
And he didn't win the Champions League with it, did he? No. So he did exactly what Conte did. He won the league. So there you go. He won the league.
I think it's unfair to say that getting eliminated in the group stage is the same as losing the final. There's a big difference.
You said he had the same midfield that Conte did. He did almost the same thing. Trophy-wise, he did the same thing. He won the Coppa Italia, which I think Conte
but he was much closer to winning the Champions League than Conte has ever was during his entire career. So
that's what the assessment was, that if he would win the Champions League. His track record says he's never won the Champions League. I think that's a very valid point for the management to wonder if it's the coach's problem because he's never won in Europe.
Well, then I don't know why people think that the solution is to get rid of Allegri and get a person who has never won the Champions League in Sarri, and then get Pirlo, who has never coached a
Agreed. I think Sarri was a bad player. There were better ones, and I also would say that there were better ones than Pirlo. I think part of that is, they're in a transition financially. I think that's part of the reason it was hired. But I do think that I think that the idea that if Allegri stays, everything magically remains the same, I don't necessarily know is true.
And if you think about Klopp, before Liverpool, he lost the final with Dortmund, and he was famous for losing finals. But at the same time, Liverpool made a very smart choice by, supporting him and being patient. And in the end, he won the Champions League. So I think the management should have given Allegri more time and should have given him at least 1 or 2 more transfer windows.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Again,
they gave him 2 years to win though. Klopp won the next year. They gave Klopp time. Yeah, he lost the final and then won the next year. If Klopp doesn't win that final, we think he gets maybe another shot. I mean, I don't know. Pochettino went to the final and got sacked right immediately. That's kind of how football works nowadays. I don't know if I like it, but that's kind of how it works in certain clubs.
Yeah, Pochettino was not sacked because he lost the final. He was sacked because in the league they were mid-table. So
yeah, they started suffering in the league the following season. But here's the thing. Again, I just bring it to the start of the decline and starting to question those results that were coming easily for Allegri, because it started to become a question. Where are we going to get those? The team was changing. Was it the right move at the time? Right now, where we sit and whatnot, it's easy to say no, but did we need that change in philosophy? Did you agree with it at the time, AJ?
I don't want to. Yeah, I want to be honest. So yes, I was. I felt that there was a change needed. There was a change needed. But at the same time, looking at how we did after Allegri, I'm looking back and realizing that it was the wrong move.
I think it was the wrong move. Lewis, did
Yeah.
you think at the time we needed that change?
Yes. I mean, I'm still so on the it's right or not. I'll give to the end of the year to figure that out because the season's not over.
Excuse me. Did you think that we should have spent the money on a guy like Pochettino when he was available rather than go with Sarri?
Yes, 100%.
No, for me.
AJ,
So,
no for you.
I mean, I don't think there was like Pochettino has a similar profile to Sarri. You know, he's a coach who plays attacking football who has never won a trophy in his career. So I don't know why we would think that Allegri, who won so many trophies, should be replaced with someone who has won nothing in his career, and that will somehow help us in winning the Champions League. So I don't think that's.
Did we not? Here's where I stood. I see the similarities in Pochettino and a guy that took a team that had no business making that Champions League final to there. So a bit of an overachiever with what he had. Not a massive payroll roster or whatnot. I was intrigued by the thought of what he could do with a better roster, which I thought we had for sure. So I was kind of intrigued on that.
I like Pochettino because the names in the Spurs locker room. To get that team to the final, like you have to be able to manage big personalities. I thought Sarri was a bad fit because he doesn't know how to manage big personalities. Like you go from like Napoli to Juventus, your dressing room is very different. You can be an annoying prick to Koulibaly. That doesn't necessarily work with Giorgio Chiellini and Cristiano Ronaldo. You know, like it's a different level. Like you have to know your man management.
I mean, yeah. I mean, I think Pochettino is not like I don't consider him like a role model to be the coach of Juve. So his entire career at Spurs was full of inconsistencies. One time they win, the next time they lose. But you know, at Juve you have to win like week in, week out. Spurs were kind of famous for their inconsistencies, so I don't think Pochettino would have been a good fit for Juve. And let's not forget that Spurs like never challenged for the league, maybe once against Leicester, but other than that, they did nothing. They did reach the Champions League final, but they haven't won anything else.
This results thing is a tough one though too, because if we're going to go on that, you're not going to hire many coaches, to be honest. Why would we have hired Conte? What did Conte achieve before coming to us?
Also,
sweet fuck all.
Yeah.
What did Allegri win before coming to us? He won Serie A because he had a stacked Milan at that time.
Also, if you're talking about results, no coach in Europe has the winning percentage Allegri does. It's been 2 years. Why hasn't he found another job? I mean, if that was the only thing that got you hired, like Allegri should be hired immediately. I mean, you would think that PSG, who's a team that's borderline Champions League, right, would hire or at least offer for the most expensive, the most winningest coach, right? Hasn't been able to find a job. Spurs.
I mean, I don't think
reportedly.
I don't think it's like that. I don't think that no one wants Allegri, so he's probably waiting on some of the like top jobs in Europe, or I feel that he thinks at some point that Pirlo will collapse and he's gonna get a phone call from Agnelli to come back.
I do actually.
That's what I think he has in mind. You know.
Yeah, I do agree with that, AJ. I agree with that a little bit. I do think. I have a feeling there was a report that he turned down Roma last year, like right before Sarri got sacked, and I almost wondered if he was like, "Ooh, maybe I'll get the job again." Like I do kind of wonder that a little.
Yeah, you know what? And here we go on what's been here we go on what's been an awesome hot takes debate. You guys have done an amazing job. I've enjoyed myself. I've been like one of these viewers in the live. This has been fantastic, and I gotta say, man, at one point I was like, yeah, I think I'm siding with Lewis. At one point, AJ had me. I'm like, you know what? Fucking let's sack Pirlo today and let's just bring this fucking guy back. Let's just bring Allegri back. He had me. I was like, oh fuck, we made a mistake. Look, we all agree the philosophy should have changed. We're maybe thinking, I think we all kind of agree too, it seemed hasty and not better prepared out of our management. I think it seemed rushed. It looked to me like Sarri was, oh shit, our plan failed. Let's just get him. That's what Sarri felt like to me.
Yeah.
With Pirlo, I think he was honestly hired for what he was, which was the U23 side. And then they realized they couldn't go any further with Sarri because everybody hated him in the locker room. So then they're like, okay, we're going to bring Pirlo in. And I don't think this was something that was premeditated. Hey, we're going to need 23 and we're going to sack Sarri. I think it was literally like, okay, we don't have to, we're already paying, we paid Allegri out. We have these contracts with these players. We got to buy out. We have to pay Sarri now another season or whatnot that he's not going to be coaching. You bring in a guy like Pirlo, it's 1.8 million or something he makes a season, and you move along. I think the whole thing was mismanaged, but we all agree the philosophy did need to change. Having said that, would you take Allegri back if we make the next move and decide that we can't move forward with Pirlo? I'm not saying we need to sack Pirlo or anything like that. Would you take him back?
2 conditions.
I would. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say yes on 2 conditions. Number 1, there's nobody better to get. So, I mean, unless like there's someone like crazy out there that we know is like, an automatic winner.
And speaking of which, could you name the coaches who you think are better than Allegri?
Pep Guardiola would be one.
Okay.
Zinedine Zidane would be another one, I think. I mean, you could argue that maybe Zidane piggybacked off the success of a great team, but 3 Champions League in a row is tough. It would be something like that. But the second thing, which I think is the most important, is what would he bring differently to the table is what I'd like to know. Is it going to be the same, or is it maybe Allegri has spent 2 years working on his style of play and thinks that he can progress it a little bit more from what we saw in the last 2 years? And that would be my conditions. But I wouldn't say no. I'd call it a yes with intrigue.
Yeah.
Okay, I would say yes, obviously. So I would take Allegri back, and unlike Louis, it's under no conditions. So, I think those 2 past years, trying to change the style, we obviously failed in doing so, which means that we should fall back on what made us a great team in the first place, which is being, pragmatic, more defensive. And yeah, so I would happily take Allegri back because I think we're in a much worse place right now than when we were under Allegri.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that run through my mind when I think about the thought of bringing him back. I think about where I see the shift and the beginning of this decline that we're going to call started with him. And not just his final season, halfway through the season prior to it, I saw that shift. My concern is, would he be coming back, and would we start to become a team that's looking for those older players, experienced guys again, and lose this shift, this balance, what we're trying to do? Do we all agree that we need a younger project? Do we think Allegri could work with that? Seemed like he always went to the experienced guys, right? If he came in now, is he going to be relying on that old spine again, right? There's a lot of things that run through my head. Would he be able to do better with these guys when the decline started a year and a half in his tenure? I think we'd be better prepared. I see Pirlo taking a lot of heat for sometimes his players just not being up to snuff, and I look back at rosters and whatnot, and I don't think there's a massive gap in roster from what Allegri had to what Pirlo had outside of the 15 season with that midfield, you know? So if we look at where the decline started to now, is the roster better? I think so, but not drastically. I don't think it's drastically better. You know, it's it's a really, really tough one, and I don't know. For me, when you bring guys back, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, but the gut reaction is yes. You know, like your instant gut is like, yeah, because I have to side with AJ on the fact that the teams that we shouldn't be dropping points to, I don't think it happens. You know, so I'd probably say yes. As far as who's better than Allegri out there, maybe we have to see Allegri take another job to truly assess that. You know,
one thing, yeah. So, so this question is for both Alberto and Louis. So, if you ask Serie A competitors like Inter and Milan, who do you want as Juve's coach? Do you want Allegri or someone else? I think they'd all say they don't want Allegri, so they never want to compete against Allegri because of the misery he caused to other teams in Serie A. So that's one thing I know for sure. So teams that um, um, don't want Juve to succeed in Serie A, they want anyone but Allegri. So that's for sure.
One thing that I do miss about Max is you would see him in certain games just go after players. Like, you remember, like, infamously, there's that touchline video against Fiorentina where Bernardeschi doesn't pass the ball and he just yells at the bench, like, what does he think this is, like a five-a-side game? You know, he was very like that old Tuscan kind of style. I don't know if that fits with modern football, but I miss it a little bit. Like, I think that there are times where you would need someone like Allegri. Really, he was infamous for dropping Paul Pogba a couple times where you just be like, yeah, you're not up to stop, and just drop him for a game and say, we need rest, right? So that's something I do miss about Allegri. It would be a welcome back because I heard you talk about this against Porto. Sometimes this team needs a kick in the ass. And you know, like the murder game famously where he storms down the sideline and he's throwing players while they're taunting the fans. Like, we do miss that a little bit.
This was a good one too when he hit Palita on the head near the touchline and sacked him. That one was always funny.
Capri that he throws onto the pitch. That's a good one. Yeah.
What I love is that if you look at the attitude of the team overall during Allegri's time, yes, they won Serie A 5 times, and in some game they're playing against a team that's in 20th place. And Juve is winning 2-0, but you see like 100% commitment from the team, and they're taking the game 100% seriously with 100% focus. So that is something that I feel that we like right now. So I see lots of stupid mistakes that we lose points, like the mistake of Bentancur the other day.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things, I did not see them happening like a lot under Allegri.
I have to agree. You know, I wouldn't see that stuff happening, but I also think, like, did we become a team when we started this decline under Allegri? Were we starting to take those matches off? Did it start there? Did he start like the fire that he showed and whatnot? Did it start to lose its bile over time with the guys? You know,
I would say no, because in the last year under Allegri, we got over 90 points, and we were actually the last team to lose in Europe's top 5 leagues at that season. So we were still getting the results. So if the attitude of the team was poor, then we would not have won those games in the first place.
Yeah,
I would say that the one thing that I could defend Allegri on is that you can make the argument that in that last year, because they won the title by like 20 points, like they won it in like April, right? Remember they were like trying to lose games not to win the title, like right before they won it. I think they like drew the Pescara or someone that we shouldn't have. Like, we played our B team that game. Like, we were so far ahead that, like, you know, they played Milan and they rested Ronaldo because they had a European game like midweek. Like, you do wonder if like the team itself switched off, not necessarily his fault, but they were just so far ahead of Serie A that like they could afford to switch off domestically, and then just trying to restart that in Europe is very difficult. So there is an argument in his defense there. But I mean, Allegri, I could say at the bottom line, is a great coach. I'd never take that away from him. So if he came back, you always welcome a great coach back.
Yeah, Allegri's a Juve legend. There's no question about it. He's a legend for us. Did we? Here's the thing, because this whole thing was, what if Max stayed? Did we make a mistake, Lewis? Should he have stayed?
In hindsight, yes. At the time, no. So what I mean by that is, if we were talking hindsight, Sarri was not as good of a coach as Allegri. And I think you can argue that, if you have Max, who's kind of a club guy, he could afford a summer like we had where we were transitioning. Maybe he'd be on board for that. At the time, though, I understand why they sacked Max.
I think, I think what we've done is we've achieved what we needed to show everybody, which is that the answer is not always yes or no. It's not always right and wrong. It's somewhere in between. Because this whole debate, what if Max stayed? All three of us agreed a change in philosophy was required. But I think we all agree it might have been a mistake to move him because of how it was handled and who we brought in. Started this kind of spiral. So the answer, there you go, is kind of somewhere in between.
And I think we are the only fan base that sometimes looks up to worse options. So Allegri winning the league in first place, and we're like, oh, let's play a Sarri ball, which won nothing, or let's get Pochettino, who won nothing. So those teams, Napoli, Spurs, they dream of winning the league, but they never did so, even though they had coaches with a philosophy that we somehow look up to.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, we wanted the change of philosophy. We believed we should. I don't necessarily know if Allegri would have been the guy for the philosophy we're looking for. And I'm not 100% sold we have the guy that's for the philosophy we need, but time will tell. Here's the last question regarding our current manager, because I've seen it a lot now. If we do not win domestically, if we don't get to a decent advancement in Champions League, do we fire Pirlo?
I think for me, it depends on how we finish. So if let's say that we make a run at the league and we lose by like 4 points, it's close, right? I would say no. But if it's like how AJ plays out and we're fighting for top 4 to the last day and we don't win the Coppa Italia and Porto spank us in the second leg, I think that there's a very good argument to say, hey, there's better options out here. But I think it's in terms of how the project progresses. But that's just me. AJ?
I think if he does not win Serie A and if he does not make a decent run in the Champions League, then I think he should be fired, especially if another top coach is available. So let's say Allegri or Zidane or Guardiola were available, I'd definitely sack Pirlo. I know that people say, oh, we should look at the context of how we lose, not just the results. But at the end of the day, the results is all that matter. So Napoli came so close to winning Serie A with Sarri, but then things didn't work out with them, and they sacked him. So in my opinion, there is only one way to lose Serie A, regardless of the context, and there's also one way to win it. And the only thing that we should judge the coach on is the results and the trophies that he wins. Which is, kind of interesting, because when Allegri was there, you have to win the triple or you're out. But now with that, we're Pirlo, second place in Serie A plus a decent run in the Champions League, it's fine. We should keep him. So this just shows how the bar has got so much lower since Allegri left.
I think it's I think it's a tough one for me. The reason I say it's tough for me is because I think if we have the team playing well, maybe we don't get the results, and we start if we start playing well, we make a good run, and we're kind of in the mix everywhere. If we say, well, we didn't get this trophy, we didn't get the Scudetto, we have to move on from you. What does this do with the team and the players? Who do you go out and get? Do we now have the right players for this manager? Because at some point you do have to make a commitment to somebody so that you can build the team for him. So if we're constantly going to do this now, where this guy didn't get his trophy, he's out. This guy didn't get this trophy, he's out. Man, there's going to be a lot of flex. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, we don't have the right guys for this guy. But he's not going to get another opportunity. He didn't win. So we move along. So I think it has to come down to what he's doing with the guys we have. Because, again, it's a lot easier. It's easier to, yes, change one guy, keep all these players around. But if he has the players on his side, they respect him, they back him, he's got the locker room. If we play well, and we're in the mix everywhere, I already think at this point in time, Pirlo, like realistically for me, he has matched, if not exceeded, the expectations I felt for a first-time manager ever. Not just a first-time manager with a big club, but ever, right? I think it's asking too much, and I don't know if I'm ready to pull the plug. And here's another thing: is this season has been an absolute gong show with injuries, and I see Pirlo's system working well with a certain personnel. Outside of that personnel, I think is where we struggle and we start to lose it. But I think when he has what I believe is our best 11, it looks really, really good. It's just when it doesn't and we start to get these other pieces in, his system doesn't work and it doesn't suit those guys. So whether we blame him for it or we just say we don't have the quality, which I also kind of agree with, I think it's really hard to gauge him fully, to be 100% honest. So it's a really, really tough one for me. If I would say, hey, we move Pirlo, I think ultimately I'd say we look at it and assess it at the end of the season, but assessing it now, like many are, and just saying that's it, get rid of him, I think is way too soon. I say let the season play out. Let's see what happens. It's not over with Porto. We move on there. Who knows what can happen? Let's ride it out and see. And hey, if ultimately we don't play well and it's still hit and miss, and he even brings back the best 11 and we still fail and it doesn't look good and there is a better option available, maybe. But time will tell. We will see. It starts with Crotone. Dybala probably going to get some minutes in there. We'll see what ends up happening. Guys, what if Allegri stayed has been an excellent hot takes debate. You guys both had me going, and honestly, I had always said no to just bringing him back. Just you've adopted a philosophy, but I don't know. AJ did a hell of a job. Lewis, you did a hell of a job. Guys, it's been fantastic. Thanks everyone who joined live. And by all means, there's always going to be a hot take every week. So you got a hot take that you want to bring up? Let's take it to debate and let's see what happens. This has been a lot of fun. AJ, Lewis,
we should do like Ronaldo fanboy versus Ronaldo fanboy.
Thanks everybody who joined. We'll be back for pre-match live on Monday for Crotone. Thanks, everybody. Forza Juve, fino alla fine. Ciao.